The wanderers followed a river winding softly through a valley where dawn stretched its pale fingers over water, carrying muted light across ripples that seemed older than memory. Reflections shifting with a patience that had endured countless forgotten mornings. A faint mist curled from the surface, wrapping the air in cool dampness scented with moss, clay, and the sweetness of blossoms hidden among reeds, their fragrance rising like whispers from earth itself, subtle yet lingering, delicate as dream. Each step pressed gently into damp soil, leaving faint impressions quickly blurred by dew and the hush of flowing water, as though the land itself wished no trace of their passing to disturb its deep and unbroken stillness. Along the banks lay stones, countless shapes scattered by floods and softened by centuries of current. Some ordinary, some glistening with river light, and others resting with peculiar weight, holding silence that seemed patient, waiting for attentive eyes and searching hands. One wanderer bent low, brushing moisture from a stone surface, revealing grooves carved with care, spirals turning inward like water curling upon itself, deliberate marks that belonged neither to chance nor river, but 2 hands long vanished into forgetting. The grooves caught sunlight, deep shadows forming within each curve, echoing the river's endless turning, as if the stone remembered water's voice and carried within its body the rhythm of currents flowing without beginning and without end. The stone felt unexpectedly cool beneath fingertips, its surface rough in some places, smoothed in others, with faint grit clinging to skin, as though its texture still carried the slow memory of tools shaping stories into silence. When lifted, the stone weighed more than its size suggested, as though burdened by gravity beyond mere mineral, a presence heavy with secrets, waiting across centuries for hands willing to carry what it once promised to remember. Others gathered, their shadows falling over the stone, eyes following the spirals that shifted subtly with light, appearing alive, spiraling endlessly as though not resting within stone at all, but flowing outward, reaching beyond valley and river. The murmur of water filled the silence between them, its voice answering without words, carrying both endless arrival and departure, a language of continuity whispering through reeds, rapids, and depths no one could ever fully measure. Another wanderer knelt nearby, uncovering a second stone half buried in soil, etched not with curves but with crossing lines, like rivers meeting, like paths entwined, holding directions to places unnamed, waiting for eyes to trace journeys once imagined. They brushed soil gently from its surface, fingers darkened with damp earth, uncovering patterns that seemed at once map and memory. Marks carrying fragments of distance and gathering, though the meaning remained veiled in silence, unbroken by voice. Together, the stones radiated a presence that thickened the air, as though time itself pressed closer, layering centuries upon the valley's quiet, binding their discovery to a gravity deeper than words or explanations could ever hold. The valley itself seemed hushed, trees leaning inward with trembling leaves, shadows pooling beneath branches, the breeze softening into silence, as though it too bent to listen, waiting for recognition from eyes and hearts willing to notice. The wanderers placed the stones upon grass still jeweled with dew, arranging them carefully, side by side, listening to the river's song, uncertain whether it explained or concealed, uncertain whether they were finding or being found themselves. A bird's cry drifted across pale sky, sharp yet softened by distance, vanishing into horizon, leaving behind stillness deeper than before, as the wanderer's gaze lingered upon carvings shifting with every passing angle of shadow and light. With each movement of sun, spirals became waves, lines became roads. Symbols unfolded and folded again, never resting, always in flux, alive within the stone as though stone itself breathed with rhythms of earth and sky. Time slipped gently past, unmeasured, marked only by mist rising, shadows withdrawing, warmth settling across shoulders, all while the stones remained silent yet never still, holding presence that deepened with every heartbeat spent beside them. One wanderer traced the grooves slowly, fingertip following each curve. Feeling depth pressed long ago, patience cut into stone by unknown hands, marks carved in silence, yet still echoing with intention that endured beyond forgetting. The earth breathed fragrance around them, moss cool beneath knees, watermint brushing with sharp sweetness, clay damp beneath palms. Scents rising together to weave the valley's voice into their gathering, grounding them within its quiet. It seemed the valley leaned closer, folding its silence around them, waiting not for questions or answers, but for presence. As if stones were not discovered anew, but merely recognized. Their waiting finally returned to listening eyes. The wanderers whispered softly, words barely forming. To disturb the stillness that carried its own meaning, silence more eloquent than speech. Language speaking without tongue, carving itself into air like spirals etched into stone. Each carving held more than one truth, more than one meaning, river and journey. Wave and circle, story and silence, layered endlessly, resisting confinement. Offering instead an openness that invited seeing without naming, listening without speaking. Faint echoes drifted with the current, like distant laughter carried from another age. Or perhaps only illusions of water folding upon itself, memory entangled within sound, impossible to separate from flow or from imagination. The wanderers closed their eyes, breathing slowly, resting in rhythm of water. Mist cooling their cheeks, wind stirring their hair, clouds gliding across sky. Each sensation merging into stillness as time loosened and softened its hold. When eyes opened again, the carvings seemed sharper, more defined. As though revealed by patience alone, as if only those who lingered long enough were invited beyond surface to glimpse what stone had always carried. The stones became messages entrusted to the river, kept safe for centuries. Waiting through seasons of frost and flood, now lifted by hands meant to feel their weight, to remember without needing to understand. Fingers brushed spirals once more, gathering grit, nails darkened by soil, palms damp with spray drifting from water's edge. Each touch deepening connection between skin and carving, as though contact completed a circle unbroken by time. Sunlight grew warmer, drawing shadows back into earth, leaving grooves glistening faintly, like veins of silver cut through stone, shimmering with reflections that faded and returned as light shifted gently over their surfaces. Each wanderer held a stone, sensing how weight and hand belonged together. Separated for ages, yet never wholly apart, reunited in that moment through touch, presence, and the silence that flowed between breath and heartbeat. The carving spoke without words, echoing rivers, skies, and dreams too vast for language. Voices rising not in sound, but in the patterns of form itself, telling stories without beginning or ending, carried within stone forever. Around them, reeds swayed softly with current. Insects hovered in circles of light, wings flashing briefly before vanishing into grass. Their fleeting glimmers only deepening sense of continuity that bound stone, river, and wanderer together. Time dissolved gently, the valley widening, the river stretching longer. Stones growing heavier with meanings unspoken, weaving presence into memory, into silence, into a rhythm older than measure, a rhythm that did not end. Water murmured over rapids, rhythm repeating, echoing spirals carved upon stone, cycle folding upon cycle. Endless return, endless flow, carving patterns into air, just as deeply as hands had once carved patterns into earth. The wanderers set the stones gently upon the ground, aligned with the river's flow, returning them to where they had belonged all along. Not taken but seen, not claimed but honored in their waiting. Grass bent beneath them, dew scattering into glittering droplets, momentary stars vanishing quickly, fading back into green silence. Earth reclaiming what was returned without resistance or protest, without hesitation, only with quiet welcome. They rose slowly, leaving stones untouched, guardians resting again. Unchanged, yet touched by recognition. carrying presence that would remain long after footsteps dissolved and voices faded back into silence. The valley continued its breath, water moving, wind shifting, birds circling, yet the air felt deeper, thickened by weight of silence, layered now with presence both ancient and renewed. The wanderers carried away memory of spirals and lines, grooves pressed into stone. Silence echoing louder than words, presence that would linger with them as they followed river beyond sight of the valley. Their footsteps pressed into damp soil, fading quickly as reeds closed behind, erasing evidence of passage. Valley returning to stillness as though nothing had stirred its patient silence at all. The stones remained where they had always been, spirals unbroken, lines unending. Alive with silence, bound to the river's endless rhythm, carrying stories older than memory, yet waiting always for eyes willing to see. The wanderers did not turn back, for nothing was lost. The stones were now part of their remembering, carried within silence itself, flowing with them even as the valley closed gently behind. Mist lifted, sunlight spread, river carried its endless voice forward, and the first stones rested once more, eternal guardians of silence, patient keepers of stories too ancient for memory, yet too alive to vanish. Morning light filtered softly through thin clouds, touching carved rock faces, and hands lingered over faint grooves, sensing shapes that hinted at creatures long vanished, while air carried the gentle scent of damp earth and wild grasses swaying nearby. A small stream curved beside weathered boulders, its water murmuring over stones, and fingers traced spirals etched deep into rock, following patterns that suggested rhythm, ritual, and patient observation, as though each line held a heartbeat paused across centuries. Shadows shifted across carvings of animals frozen mid-stride, and thought drifted toward the lives once entwined with these shapes. Imagining care, reverence, and cautious observation guiding hands that left subtle messages for unknown eyes centuries later. The texture of stone varied from smooth to rough, cool where river water had passed and warm where sun had lingered. And attention lingered on each subtle difference, sensing tactile history and continuity pressed into the surface of rock. A carved deer emerged from overlapping markings, legs extended, poised mid-lip, and fingers followed each line, sensing movement, grace, and intent. As thought extended across time, connecting present perception to lives and rituals long vanished from memory. Patterns of circles and arcs suggested paths and journeys. Abstract yet deliberate, and reflection wandered across imagined seasons. Ceremonies and careful observation, sensing that every mark preserved rhythm, intent, and quiet understanding between humans and the natural world. The stream whispered gently over smaller stones, rippling reflections of reeds and sky across carved surfaces, and the mind absorbed the subtle interplay of light, water, and touch, feeling continuity and presence in shapes that seemed both still and alive. Small tufts of moss pressed against rock edges, soft under fingertips, contrasting with cold stone beneath, while the gentle scent of damp limestone mixed with earthy aroma, creating a layered awareness of place, texture, and quiet time pressing through centuries. A spiral etched deeply into a boulder suggested ritual or rhythm, and hands followed its gentle curve, sensing the intention behind each turn. While imagination wandered to quiet moments of preparation, observation, and reverence, embedded in tactile memory for those willing to notice. The sun shifted slowly, and shadows danced across carvings, revealing contours and subtle reliefs, while awareness alternated between observing detail and reflecting on the continuity of human care. The quiet persistence of intention preserved in stone and echoed in touch. A faint indentation hinted at a hand, worn by time and thought, drifted to the individual who left it, imagining deliberate pauses, gentle care, and subtle reverence for life, movement, and memory quietly encoded into the tactile surface. Eyes moved across overlapping carvings of horses, bison, and abstract patterns, tracing motion, posture, and rhythm, sensing life captured in stone, understanding that survival, observation, and ritual had been encoded silently, awaiting the gentle attention of those who followed. Insects skimmed the water's surface, brushing wings softly, and attention returned to carvings, reflecting on patience, rhythm, and continuity. Feeling in each groove and curve the subtle heartbeat of humans who had observed and recorded life in quiet devotion. A larger boulder displayed complex shapes, animal and abstract forms intertwined, and hands lingered over edges softened by water, sensing the careful balance of intentionality and natural shaping. Understanding that time had preserved both effort and environmental collaboration in the stone. The stream curved around mossy stones, carrying faint echoes of movement, and thought drifted to seasons, ceremonies, and rituals that guided the creation of shapes, sensing cycles of giving, taking, and observing that were encoded in spirals, lines, and animal forms. Shadows lengthened as sunlight shifted, highlighting relief and depth, while awareness absorbed tactile, visual, and olfactory impressions, integrating stone, water, and presence into quiet reflection, carrying a sense of continuity, reverence, and subtle understanding through centuries. Steps slowed along the riverbank, noticing smooth stones and plants pressed against edges, and reflection wandered to delicate hand-shaping carvings, their pauses, gestures, and attentiveness preserved in subtle grooves, offering lessons in observation, care, and the quiet endurance of memory. A carved bison stood apart, its horns curved and legs poised, and thought lingered on life in open plains, imagining movement, survival, and ritual. Understanding how observation and reverence could be silently encoded in form, sustained across centuries in stone. Birds moved near the river, brushing air with wings, while focus shifted back to carvings, considering patience, intention, and connection. Sensing the invisible dialogue between stone, maker, and observer as reflection deepened in tactile visual and quiet, emotional perception. Grooves suggested tools and interaction, subtle yet deliberate, and thought extended across lifetimes. Imagining moments of pause, ritual, and study, while fingers traced each curve and indentation. Sensing continuity, care, and the quiet presence of those long gone. The gentle scent of wet limestone and earth mingled with wind through reeds. And awareness settled on contrasts: soft moss against hard stone, cool shadow against warm sunlight. Motionless carvings beside flowing water, blending sensory perception with quiet reflection and understanding. Fingers followed spirals, arcs, and abstract patterns, sensing rhythm, repetition, and movement. While imagination traveled across ceremonies, survival, and observation, connecting tactile awareness with memory preserved in stone, understanding that each mark carried enduring presence beyond immediate sight. Water rippled over rocks, reflecting light on subtle reliefs, and awareness alternated between river, stone, and thought, integrating present perception with centuries of patient observation, offering a quiet understanding of the rhythm between nature, human intention, and memory preserved in stone. The air carried hints of damp earth, moss, and flowing water, filling senses while thought lingered on details: the curl of a hoof, spacing of spirals, direction of grooves, revealing the quiet attention and deliberate care of those who shaped carvings centuries ago. Hands traced marks one final time, sensing depth, angle, and gentle irregularities, while reflection encompassed both past and present, noting the persistent presence embedded in stone and the quiet, patient dialogue connecting maker, observer, and landscape. Stepping back from the largest boulder, sunlight illuminated contours, shadows, and relief, and memory retained impressions of movement, spirals, and abstract lines, carrying them inward like quiet whispers. Each shape a soft reminder of life, care, and connection preserved across time. The stream continued its gentle song, stones glimmered with shifting light, and air remained cool and fragrant, while attention rested on the quiet endurance of carvings. The subtle imprint of hands long gone, and the calm continuity of memory held silently in stone. A final glance lingered on animals, patterns, and faint handprints, noting the balance of abstraction, observation, and tactile presence, while thought settled into quiet reflection, carrying reverence forward as figures moved slowly along the river, leaving stone memory preserved in mind. Sunlight shimmered on shallow pools, a gentle breeze brushed across skin, and senses absorbed sight, touch, and scent into an enduring impression, while thought rested in the slow rhythm of observation. Reflection and memory preserved in stone, water, and quiet human care. Dawn unfolded slowly over the cliffs, soft golden lights spilling across worn carvings, while fingers lingered along grooves, feeling delicate patterns and imagining hands pressing deliberately into stone, embedding quiet stories that had endured beyond immediate memory. A gentle wind stirred leaves along the path, brushing skin and carrying scents of damp earth and sun-warmed stone, as attention drifted across spirals, animals, and abstract markings. Sensing the careful rhythm and patience encoded in each subtle indentation, water trickled over uneven surfaces, shaping shallow pools against carved rock, and reflections settled on the continuity of natural forces and human intention, feeling how weather, touch, and observation combined to preserve memory quietly across centuries. Shadows shifted, revealing hidden depth in the carvings, while thought followed lines that suggested motion: horses leaping, deer pausing, abstract shapes curling into spirals inviting. A sense of reverence and understanding for lives once entwined with ritual and landscape. A smooth boulder displayed faint human figures among animals, and fingertips traced outlines slowly, sensing gesture, stance, and intent, while imagination wandered through quiet ceremonies, thoughtful observation, and patient shaping of forms intended to honor, record, and remember. Sunlight glimmered on wet stone edges, highlighting grooves, arcs, and spirals, while breath mingled with scents of clay and moss, creating awareness of place as both tactile and temporal. A gentle connection between past shaping and present perception. Small plants pressed against rock faces, soft under fingertips, contrasting with firm stone, while reflections trace the patience and care behind carvings, sensing cycles of attention, ritual, and observation that linked human intention with enduring material presence. A spiral carved deeply into gray limestone drew deliberate attention, and fingers followed the curve, sensing rhythm and flow, while imagination wandered through seasons, ceremonies, and quiet observation, understanding how tactile memory could endure when words were absent. Shadows lengthened across boulders, revealing contours, relief, and subtle depth, and reflection extended to river, trees, and sky, integrating tactile and visual experience into a quiet awareness that preserved continuity, reverence, and presence in each carved mark. Steps slowed along a mossy edge, noting the interplay of soft texture and hard stone, while thought lingered on delicate hands shaping grooves, embedding memory and care, leaving lessons in observation, patience, and quiet devotion preserved for distant eyes. A bison, carved with curved horns and poised legs, drew prolonged attention, inviting reflection on the vast plains and life cycles that inspired its shape, imagining motion, survival, and ritual quietly encoded into stone for those who noticed. Insects skimmed shallow pools, wings brushing water, and focus returned to carvings, observing subtle indentations and abstract patterns, sensing patience, intention, and reverence preserved by hands long gone. A silent dialogue bridging centuries through touch and observation. Grooves suggested spears, tools, and animal tracks, delicate yet deliberate, and thought wandered through cycles of life, survival, and ritual, recognizing that carvings conveyed both utility and reverence. a quiet archive preserved in tactile memory. A faint handprint pressed into stone invited reflection, imagining the person who left it, the care, pause, and gentle presence embedded into the rock, connecting observer and maker across time. A subtle acknowledgement of life, intention, and quiet observation. Sunlight shifted slowly, glimmering across surfaces, and awareness absorbed tactile detail, flowing water, and soft scents, blending perception and reflection into understanding how carvings existed as memory, intention, and quiet communication between past and present. Small birds flitted near the bank, brushing air and sunlight, while thought lingered on grooves, arcs, and spirals, sensing rhythm, repetition, and deliberate shaping, understanding the endurance of intention pressed into stone across generations. Moss and lichen softened edges of carved rock, contrasting with sharp relief, and reflection wandered through human care, environmental shaping, and subtle cycles of observation, teaching that memory can endure quietly in form, texture, and pattern. Fingers traced the arc of a spiral, following flow, direction, and depth, sensing rhythm and patient shaping, while imagination extended across ceremonies, observation, and care. Bridging centuries through tactile memory preserved in deliberate marks. Shadows deepened across overlapping carvings, revealing subtle reliefs and contours. And thoughts alternated between observing detail and reflecting on continuity, presence, and reverence, feeling the quiet endurance of human intention preserved in stone and landscape. Steps slowed along the riverbank, noticing smooth stones, moss pressing against edges, and water flowing over carved surfaces while reflection focused on the patient. Attentive hands that shaped each groove and the quiet dialogue preserved through tactile perception. A carved animal, poised mid-stride, drew attention, suggesting life, motion, and ritual. And fingers lingered along lines, sensing care and intention, while imagination wandered through cycles of observation, survival, and reverence embedded into enduring form. The stream whispered over smaller stones, rippling across carvings and reflecting light, and thought drifted toward continuity between maker, observer, and natural forces, sensing that memory could persist in subtle, tactile, and quiet presence. Small tufts of grass brushed fingertips, cool against stone, while attention lingered on intricate patterns, arcs, and spirals, sensing repetition, rhythm, and flow, and imagining ceremonies, seasons, and cycles that guided patient shaping of stone long ago. Sunlight shifted across boulder faces, revealing depth, shadow, and relief, while awareness absorbed tactile impressions, sight, and scent, integrating river rock and subtle motion into reflection on human intention and quiet preservation of memory. Hands traced carvings one final time, noting depth, angle, and irregularities, sensing rhythm, continuity, and quiet presence, while thought encompassed both past and present, linking maker, observer, and landscape in soft, enduring understanding. Stepping back, light glimmered across surfaces, revealing contours and subtle patterns, and reflection retained images of animals, spirals, and abstract forms, carrying inward a quiet sense of memory, reverence, and patience preserved across centuries. The river murmured steadily, stones glimmered in shifting light, and air carried cool, earthy scents, while awareness rested on the enduring presence of carved marks. Subtle human intention and the quiet continuity of memory held in tactile and visual perception. A final glance returned to spirals, animals, and faint handprints, noting balance between abstraction, observation, and tactile presence, while thought settled into calm reflection. Carrying quiet reverence forward as the figures continued along the river, leaving stone memory preserved in mind. Sunlight shimmered across shallow pools, a gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of sight, touch, and scent melded into lasting awareness as thought lingered in the rhythm of observation, reflection, and memory quietly preserved in stone, water, and care. Morning sunlight filtered through mist, touching carved rock faces with a gentle warmth, while hands lingered over grooves, tracing arcs, spirals, and animal forms. Sensing intention, patience, and reverence embedded in each subtle indentation left long ago. A shallow stream curved beside mossy stones, its water whispering softly as fingers traced faint lines suggesting creatures frozen mid-motion, while the mind drifted through centuries of careful observation, ritual, and the quiet rhythm of lives once entwined with this landscape. Shadows shifted across carvings, highlighting depth, relief, and subtle detail as attention settled on shapes that hinted at human thought. Observation and reverence, sensing the silent dialogue between maker, medium, and environment preserved through time. The scent of damp limestone mingled with wildflowers along the riverbank, soft and earthy, while fingertips followed grooves, feeling the rhythm of motion captured in stone. And reflection wandered across lives shaped by care, patience, and quiet attention to surroundings. Carvings of horses, bison, and abstract spirals emerged from worn rock. Limbs poised mid-step, shapes frozen yet alive in memory, and thought lingered on the continuity between maker and observer, past and present, preserved through texture, pattern, and tactile presence. Water rippled across shallow pools, reflecting sunlight onto surfaces, while attention moved between moving water, stationary stone, and the mind's imagination, sensing the quiet pulse of observation, patience, and reverence embedded in each careful line. A faint handprint pressed into stone invited reflection on the individual who left it. Their deliberate pause and subtle intention, suggesting a desire to mark presence without words, embedding memory into stone for future eyes to recognize and honor. Smooth edges contrasted with rough, weathered surfaces, cool under fingertips and warmed by morning sun, and thought drifted across seasons, rituals, and cycles of observation, understanding that tactile presence could carry meaning beyond spoken or written language. Abstract patterns suggested rhythm, motion, and quiet storytelling, arcs curling into spirals and intersecting lines, and hands lingered along each groove, sensing continuity between observation, intent, and the patient shaping of memory into enduring stone form. Birds moved silently along the stream, brushing reeds and light, while attention returned to carvings, noting depth, texture, and direction, sensing not only the hand that shaped them, but also the quiet passage of time pressing memory into subtle grooves. Moss pressed softly against carved edges, and the mind reflected on cycles of nature and human care, blending tactile sensation with observation, sensing how deliberate attention and environmental forces had combined to preserve these silent stories across centuries. A bison with curved horns stood among overlapping carvings, its posture poised, legs extended, evoking motion and life, and reflection extended to the rituals, survival, and observation that inspired it, appreciating the quiet patience that had guided hands shaping each line. Sunlight shifted, shadows deepened, and awareness embraced both texture and relief, integrating sight, touch, and scent into a calm reflection on continuity, presence, and the quiet conversation between maker, observer, and enduring stone landscape. Fingers traced a spiral deeply etched into limestone, following flow and curve, sensing rhythm, repetition, and intention, while imagination wandered through cycles of seasons, ceremonies, an attentive observation that guided patient shaping of stone into stories lasting beyond memory. Water whispered softly over stones, rippling across carved surfaces, while thought drifted between the tactile impressions and imagined life of makers, sensing quiet care, reverence, and attention encoded into each line. Each mark a preserved pulse of long-past intention. Shadows stretched across edges, revealing relief and subtle contours, as perception alternated between observing detail and reflecting on continuity, presence, and patience. understanding how quiet attention could endure in grooves and tactile impressions through centuries. Steps slowed along the riverbank, noting worn stone, mossy patches, and flowing water, while reflection lingered on hands long gone, shaping carvings with patience, reverence, and deliberate rhythm, leaving subtle instructions and quiet memory embedded in the stone. A horse carved mid-stride drew attention, limbs poised, motion frozen. And thought extended to survival, ritual, and observation encoded in each line, sensing that the rhythm of life, care, and reverence could be quietly preserved in tactile form for distant observers. Small insects skimmed water's surface, brushing wings against sunlight, while focus returned to carvings, noticing patterns, arcs, and subtle depth, sensing patience, continuity, and reverence embedded by hands long gone, bridging past and present through touch and observation. Grooves suggested tools and motion, subtle yet deliberate. And thought drifted across centuries, imagining observation, ritual, and care, while fingers lingered along each line, sensing quiet dialogue, continuity, and the enduring presence of human intention pressed into stone. The scent of damp limestone and earth mixed with river air, filling senses while thought focused on tiny details, the curve of a hoof, spacing of spirals, direction of arcs, revealing subtle care, observation, and patience embedded in each carefully shaped form. Fingers followed arcs and spirals, sensing rhythm, direction, and depth, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and seasons, bridging centuries of intention and reflection, and understanding that tactile memory could preserve meaning quietly beyond words or immediate perception. Sunlight glimmered across shallow pools, reflecting patterns on carved surfaces, while awareness alternated between observation, touch, and quiet reflection, sensing rhythm, presence, and reverence preserved through centuries of patient shaping and environmental interaction. Hands traced grooves one final time, noting subtle irregularities, depth, and angle, sensing quiet rhythm and enduring presence, while reflection encompassed past and present, linking maker, observer, and landscape through tactile and perceptive understanding. Stepping back from the largest boulder, light highlighted contours, spirals, and animal forms. And thought retained impressions of motion, abstraction, and pattern, carrying them inward as quiet memory, reverence, and patient observation preserved an enduring stone. The river flowed steadily, stones glimmered with shifting sunlight, and air carried faint earthy scents, while awareness settled on the enduring presence of carved marks, subtle intention, and quiet continuity, leaving impressions that lingered like soft echoes through centuries. A final glance lingered on spirals, animals, and faint handprints, noticing balance between abstraction, observation, and tactile memory, while thought rested in calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved slowly along the bank, leaving stone memory preserved in mind. Sunlight shimmered across the stream, a gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of touch, sight, and scent melded into lasting awareness, while thought lingered in the rhythm of observation, reflection, and memory, quietly preserved in stone, water, and patient care. Morning dew clung to moss along the cliff edges. Fingers brushed over worn carvings, feeling the texture of stone softened by centuries, sensing faint outlines of animals, spirals, and abstract shapes that echoed quiet observation from long ago. Sunlight filtered through scattered clouds, illuminating subtle reliefs while thought drifted across generations of care. The patient shaping of each groove suggesting hands attentive to rhythm, motion, and ritual, embedding both reverence and memory into tactile form for unseen observers. The river murmured softly along its winding path. Stones glimmered with shifting reflections, and touch lingered on carvings, following faint curves, arcs, and loops, while imagination wandered through ceremonies, observation, and quiet presence preserved within each indentation. Shadows shifted over carvings of horses, mid-leap, and bison poised, revealing depth and motion, and reflection extended toward the lives that inspired them. Sensing the rhythm, movement, and patience of careful hands recording memory in enduring stone. A shallow pool reflected sunlight across intricate spirals, and hands traced curves, sensing subtle irregularities that suggested intentionality, care, and rhythm. While thought lingered on the cycles of observation and reverence that had guided creation of every carved line. Small tufts of moss pressed gently against stone edges, soft beneath fingertips, contrasting with firm, weathered surfaces, and reflection wandered across seasons, ceremonies, and patient observation, feeling the quiet endurance of memory, preserved in tactile and visual form. Abstract patterns curled into spirals and intersecting lines, arcs suggesting motion, and fingers followed each groove, sensing rhythm and repetition, while imagination drifted through ritual, observation, and attentive care that shaped subtle stories enduring beyond immediate perception. The stream whispered over rocks, carrying reflections of reeds, clouds, and light, while thought alternated between observing carved detail and reflecting on continuity, presence, and reverence embedded in stone, capturing both the quiet patience and intention of long-past hands. Birds skimmed the water's surface, brushing wings against sunlight, and focus returned to carvings, noting depth, texture, and direction. Sensing patient intention, quiet observation, and reverence embedded by hands long gone, connecting maker, observer, and enduring landscape. A boulder displayed faint handprints among abstract shapes, inviting reflection on individuals who shaped them, pauses, and deliberate movements pressed into stone, preserving memory, care, and subtle guidance for those attentive to tactile and visual presence. Shadows deepened across uneven surfaces, revealing contours, relief, and subtle depth, while awareness absorbed tactile, visual, and olfactory impressions, integrating stone, water, and environment into reflection on continuity. Quiet presence and reverence preserved across centuries. A carved horse stood mid-step, muscles and posture suggested motion, while fingers followed grooves slowly, sensing rhythm, intent, and patient shaping, and imagination wandered across the ceremonies. Observation and attentive care that guided the creation of enduring forms. Water rippled over shallow stones, reflecting sunlight across relief, while attention lingered on arcs, spirals, and animal forms, sensing subtle repetition, rhythm, and continuity. Feeling how human intention could endure in form and texture long after life moved on. Moss and lichen softened edges of carved rock, adding tactile contrast to grooves, while thought drifted through observation, ritual, and patient shaping. Understanding that tactile memory could preserve quiet presence, reverence, and continuity across centuries of wind, rain, and sun. Fingers traced intricate patterns slowly, following curves, spirals, and arcs, sensing rhythm, flow, and deliberate shaping, while reflection drifted toward rituals, observation, and attentive care embedded in stone, carrying memory and quiet human presence forward across time. Shadows stretched and shifted across carved surfaces, revealing subtle relief, depth, and nuance, as perception alternated between observing detail and reflecting on continuity, patience, and reverence, sensing how careful attention had been preserved in stone for distant eyes. Steps slowed along riverbank stones, noting smooth surfaces, moss, and rippling water, while reflection lingered on hands that had shaped grooves with care and patience, leaving subtle instructions, quiet observation, and enduring memory embedded for future visitors to recognize. A bison poised mid-stride drew attention, legs extended, horns curved, evoking motion, life, and ritual, while fingers lingered along edges, sensing care, intention, and patience encoded in subtle forms, allowing the rhythm of life and observation to endure silently in stone. Insects brushed water with wings, light reflected on ripples, and attention returned to carvings, noting arcs, spirals, and subtle grooves. Sensing patient intention, continuity, and reverence preserved by hands long gone, bridging centuries through tactile perception and quiet observation. Grooves suggested tools, motion, and human presence, subtle yet deliberate. While thought drifted across observation, ritual, and cycles of care, fingers lingering along each line, sensing dialogue, continuity, and the enduring presence of intention pressed into stone for distant observers. The scent of damp limestone, moss, and earth mingled with river air, filling senses while thought lingered on details: the curve of a hoof, spacing of spirals, direction of arcs revealing subtle care, observation, and patient shaping preserved quietly in tactile form. Fingers followed arcs, spirals, and curves, sensing flow, rhythm, and depth, while imagination wandered across ceremonies, observation, and seasons, connecting centuries of intention and reflection. Understanding that tactile memory could preserve quiet meaning without words or immediate recognition. Sunlight shimmered across pools and stones, reflecting light onto relief, while awareness alternated between tactile sensation, observation, and quiet reflection, sensing presence, continuity, and reverence preserved through careful shaping and natural forces acting across centuries. Hands traced carvings one last time, noting subtle irregularities, angles, and depth, sensing quiet rhythm and enduring presence, while reflection encompassed past and present, linking maker, observer, and landscape through tactile and perceptive memory, feeling the dialogue across time. Stepping back, sunlight illuminated contours, spirals, and animal forms, and memory retained impressions of motion, abstraction, and careful shaping, carrying inward quiet reverence, patient observation, and enduring tactile memory preserved in stone across centuries. The river murmured steadily, stones glimmered in shifting light, and air carried earthy scents, while awareness rested on enduring carved marks. Subtle human intention and quiet continuity, leaving impressions like soft echoes across time. Embedding observation and care in perception. A final glance lingered on spirals, animals, and handprints, noting balance between abstraction, observation, and tactile memory, while thought rested in calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved along the bank, leaving stone memory preserved in awareness. Sunlight shimmered on flowing water, a gentle breeze brushed skin and sensory impressions of touch. Sight and scent blended into lasting awareness, while thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and memory quietly preserved in stone, water, and patient care. Morning sunlight filtered softly across carved surfaces, warming stone edges while fingers lingered on grooves, tracing arcs, spirals, and faint figures, sensing the deliberate rhythm, care, and patience pressed into each mark by hands that had vanished long ago. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves above, brushing skin and carrying earthy scents of moss, damp soil, and river water, while attention drifted across shapes suggesting animals, motion, and ritual, as though past life whispered quietly through the texture of stone. Shadows shifted with the sun, revealing relief and depth along intricate carvings, while thought moved across centuries of patient shaping, ceremonies, and cycles of observation, sensing subtle communication between maker, medium, and enduring natural forces around each mark. Small pools reflected sunlight onto spirals, arcs, and abstract lines, while hands traced each curve, noticing subtle irregularities, rhythm, and flow, and imagination wandered through quiet rituals. Attentive observation and reverent shaping of memory preserved in tactile stone form. Moss pressed softly against carved edges, cool under fingertips, contrasting with weathered rock, and reflection lingered on human care, seasonal cycles, and deliberate shaping, understanding that memory could survive in tactile patterns, rhythms, and enduring forms across centuries. Animals etched into stone, poised mid-motion, suggested both movement and observation, and fingers followed the lines slowly, sensing rhythm, intention, and patient attention, while imagination drifted through ceremonies, observation, and quiet cycles of life embedded in subtle grooves. Water whispered along stones, rippling over shallow carvings, while thought lingered on tactile impressions, shadows, and reflections, noticing arcs, spirals, and faint relief, and sensing reverence, patience, and quiet continuity preserved across time through subtle human shaping. Shadows deepened along boulder faces, revealing contours, relief, and fine detail, while perception alternated between observation and reflection, recognizing patience, continuity, and reverence embedded in each groove, linking maker, observer, and environment in quiet understanding. Steps slowed along mossy edges, observing worn surfaces, shallow streams, and carved figures, while thought drifted across centuries of attention, care, and observation, sensing that tactile memory and quiet intention could endure, bridging lives long gone with present awareness. A bison poised mid-stride drew attention, legs extended, horns curved, evoking motion, life, and ritual, while fingers lingered along edges, sensing deliberate shaping, quiet observation, and patient rhythm encoded in stone, allowing human presence to endure silently over centuries. Insects skimmed water, brushing sunlight, while focus returned to carvings, noting arcs, spirals, and subtle relief, sensing patience, continuity, and reverence encoded by hands long gone, linking observation, tactile memory, and quiet understanding across time and space. Grooves suggested tools, motion, and observation, subtle yet deliberate, and thought drifted across rituals, attentive care, and cycles of life, fingers following each line, sensing dialogue, continuity, and enduring presence pressed into stone for careful observers. The scent of damp limestone, moss, and earth mingled with river air, filling awareness while thought lingered on tiny details: the curve of a hoof, depth of spirals, direction of arcs, revealing subtle care, observation, and quiet memory preserved in tactile form. Fingers traced curves, spirals, and arcs, sensing flow, rhythm, and deliberate shaping, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and seasons, linking centuries of patient attention and reflection, understanding that tactile memory preserved quiet meaning beyond words. Sunlight shimmered across rippling water and shallow pools, reflecting patterns onto carved surfaces, while awareness alternated between tactile sensation, observation, and quiet reflection, sensing presence, continuity, and reverence preserved through careful shaping and natural forces across time. Hands followed grooves one last time, noting subtle irregularities, depth, and angle, sensing quiet rhythm, endurance, and attentive presence, while reflection encompassed past and present, linking maker, observer, and landscape through tactile perception and memory spanning centuries. Stepping back, light revealed contours, spirals, and animal forms, and memory retained impressions of motion, abstraction, and deliberate shaping, carrying inward quiet reverence, patient observation, and enduring tactile memory preserved in stone across generations. The river flowed steadily, stones glimmered with shifting sunlight, and air carried earthy scents, while awareness rested on enduring carved marks. Subtle human intention and quiet continuity, leaving impressions like soft echoes across time, embedding observation and reverence in perception. A final glance lingered on spirals, animals, and faint handprints, noticing balance between abstraction, observation, and tactile memory, while thought rested in calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved along the bank, leaving stone memory preserved in mind. Sunlight shimmered on flowing water, gentle breeze brushing skin, and sensory impressions of touch. Sight and scent blended into lasting awareness, while thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, quietly preserved in stone, water, and patient care. Edges of carved boulders warmed under sunlight, moss and lichens softened tactile contrast, and attention wandered between surface and relief. Sensing the patient shaping of each groove and the quiet presence preserved across centuries through touch and observation. Small patterns suggested life, motion, and rhythm, fingers tracing each line slowly, sensing deliberate shaping and attention, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and subtle ceremonies embedded in stone, bridging generations through quiet, tactile memory. Rippling water reflected arcs and spirals, shadows shifting across surfaces, while thought alternated between observing detail and reflecting on continuity. Presence and reverence, sensing patient attention and quiet endurance preserved in grooves pressed by hands long gone. A carved handprint, faint but visible, invited reflection on care, presence, and intention embedded in stone. Imagining the person who left it and the deliberate pause, patience, and attention that allowed memory to endure without words across centuries. Sunlight glimmered on shallow pools, moss brushed against fingers, and attention returned to patterns, arcs, and reliefs, sensing rhythm, repetition, and subtle presence, while reflection wandered across cycles of life, observation, and ceremonial attention quietly preserved in stone. Steps slowed along the bank, observing worn carvings, mossy patches, and flowing water, while thought lingered on patient hands shaping grooves, leaving subtle tactile memory, quiet observation, and enduring presence, bridging centuries with calm, reverence, and understanding. Shadows stretched across boulders, revealing contours and relief, while awareness absorbed tactile, visual, and olfactory impressions, integrating river, stone, and light into reflection on the enduring presence of human intention and the quiet dialogue between past and present. A final tracing of spirals, animals, and abstract lines left fingers lingering on grooves, sensing rhythm, care, and subtle intention, while memory settled into calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as observers moved slowly through riverbanks and carved stone. Sunlight shimmered on water, gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of touch, sight, and scent melded into lasting awareness as thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and quiet memory preserved in stone, water, and patient shaping. Dawn light brushed across rock faces, illuminating spirals and animal forms while fingers followed grooves slowly, sensing deliberate rhythm, subtle intention, and centuries of patient shaping, each indentation a quiet echo of lives observed, remembered, and preserved in stone. A gentle breeze carried earthy scents of damp moss, river water, and sun-warmed limestone, brushing skin and stirring hair, while attention lingered on carved figures, imagining rituals, observation, and quiet ceremonies captured in tactile patterns that spoke silently across generations. Shadows shifted over abstract lines and overlapping arcs, revealing subtle depth and relief, while thought drifted across centuries of careful attention, reverence, and patient shaping, sensing that memory and presence could be embedded in grooves and textures enduring beyond spoken words. Small pools reflected sunlight onto edges of carvings, highlighting gentle curves and faint handprints, while hands lingered on surfaces, tracing motion, rhythm, and form, and imagination wandered through lives shaped by observation, ritual, and attentive engagement with both nature and stone. Moss pressed softly against carved edges, cool, undertouch and fragrant with earthiness, contrasting with weathered stone, and reflection extended toward the patient care, ceremonial attention, and subtle observation embedded by those long vanished, leaving tactile memory quietly preserved. Animals frozen mid-stride suggested motion, life, and quiet observation, while fingers followed contours slowly, sensing rhythm, intent, and deliberate shaping, and imagination drifted across rituals, cycles of life, and attentive shaping that allowed memory to endure silently in stone. Water rippled over stones, brushing carved surfaces with soft murmurs, while thought alternated between observation of detail and quiet reflection. Noticing arcs, spirals, and relief, sensing reverence, patient care, and continuity preserved across centuries through subtle human touch. Shadows deepened across boulders, revealing texture, relief, and nuance. As perception shifted between tactile observation and reflective thought, recognizing enduring presence, quiet, patience, and human reverence encoded into grooves for patient observers centuries later. Steps slowed along riverbanks, noticing smooth surfaces, moss patches, and rippling reflections, while thought lingered on hands that shaped carvings with quiet care, leaving subtle memory, attentive observation, and deliberate marking that bridged centuries with calm reverence. A bison poised mid-stride drew attention, legs extended, head lowered, horns curved, evoking both life and ritual, while fingers lingered along edges, sensing careful shaping, quiet observation, and enduring rhythm embedded in stone that preserved human intention over time. Insects skimmed water's surface, brushing sunlight with delicate wings, while attention returned to carvings, noting arcs, spirals, and relief, sensing patient care, continuity, and reverence encoded by hands long gone, linking past and present through tactile perception and quiet understanding. Grooves suggested tools, motion, and deliberate shaping, subtle yet meaningful, while thought drifted across observation, ritual, and attentive cycles of care, fingers tracing each line, sensing dialogue, continuity, and enduring presence pressed into stone for perceptive eyes. The scent of damp limestone, moss, and earth mingled with river air, filling senses while thought lingered on tiny details, the curve of a hoof, spacing of spirals, direction of arcs revealing subtle care. Observation and patient memory preserved quietly in tactile form. Fingers traced curves, spirals, and arcs, sensing flow, rhythm, and deliberate shaping, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and seasonal cycles, linking centuries of patient attention and reflection. Understanding that tactile memory preserved quiet meaning beyond immediate perception. Sunlight shimmered across shallow pools and rippling water, reflecting patterns onto carved surfaces, while awareness alternated between tactile sensation, observation, and quiet reflection. Sensing presence, continuity, and reverence preserved through patient shaping and natural forces across centuries. Hands followed grooves one last time, noting subtle irregularities, depth, and angle. Sensing quiet rhythm, endurance, and attentive presence, while reflection encompassed past and present. Linking maker, observer, and landscape through tactile perception and memory across time. Stepping back, sunlight revealed contours, spirals, and animal forms, and memory retained impressions of motion, abstraction, and deliberate shaping, carrying inward quiet reverence, patient observation, and enduring tactile memory preserved in stone across generations. The river flowed steadily, stones glimmered with shifting sunlight, and air carried earthy scents, while awareness rested on enduring carved marks. Subtle human intention and quiet continuity, leaving impressions like soft echoes across time. Embedding observation and reverence in perception. A final glance lingered on spirals, animals, and faint handprints, noting balance between abstraction, observation, and tactile memory. While thought rested in calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved along the bank, leaving stone memory preserved in mind. Sunlight shimmered on flowing water, gentle breeze brushing skin, and sensory impressions of touch. Sight and scent blended into lasting awareness as thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and memory quietly preserved in stone, water, and patient shaping. Edges of carved boulders warmed under sunlight, moss and lichen softened tactile contrast, and attention wandered between surface and relief, sensing the patient shaping of each groove and the quiet presence preserved across centuries through touch and observation. Small patterns suggested life, motion, and rhythm, fingers tracing each line slowly, sensing deliberate shaping and attention. While imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and subtle ceremonies embedded in stone, bridging generations through quiet, tactile memory. Rippling water reflected arcs and spirals, shadows shifting across surfaces, while thought alternated between observing detail and reflecting on continuity. Presence and reverence, sensing patient attention and quiet endurance preserved in grooves pressed by hands long gone. A carved handprint, faint but visible, invited reflection on care, presence, and intention embedded in stone. Imagining the person who left it and the deliberate pause, patience, and attention that allowed memory to endure without words across centuries. Sunlight glimmered on shallow pools, moss brushed against fingers, then attention returned to patterns, arcs, and reliefs, sensing rhythm, repetition, and subtle presence, while reflection wandered across cycles of life, observation, and ceremonial attention quietly preserved in stone. Steps slowed along the bank, observing worn carvings, mossy patches, and flowing water, while thought lingered on patient hands shaping grooves, leaving subtle tactile memory, quiet observation, and enduring presence, bridging centuries with calm, reverence, and understanding. Shadows stretched across boulders, revealing contours and relief, while awareness absorbed tactile, visual, and olfactory impressions, integrating river, stone, and light into reflection on the enduring presence of human intention and the quiet dialogue between past and present. A final tracing of spirals, animals, and abstract lines left fingers lingering on grooves, sensing rhythm, care, and subtle intention, while memory settled into calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as observers moved slowly through riverbanks and carved stone. Sunlight shimmered on water, gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of touch, sight, and scent melded into lasting awareness as thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and quiet memory preserved in stone, water, and patient shaping. Morning mist hung low over boulders, softening outlines and cooling skin, while fingers traced faint arcs and animal figures, sensing delicate intention, patient care, and centuries of quiet observation embedded in grooves that held memory beyond language or measure. Sunlight filtered through leaves, dancing across surfaces and highlighting reliefs, while thought wandered across hands long vanished, imagining careful shaping, rhythmic motion, and subtle ritual, sensing continuity between human presence, tactile memory, and enduring landscape through silent interaction. Shadows stretched across spirals, curves, and lines, revealing depth and nuance, while attention lingered on relief and texture, contemplating subtle cycles, patient observation, and ceremonial care engraved by deliberate human action that endured quietly in stone over countless seasons. Small pools of water mirrored sunlight onto carved surfaces, while touch explored arcs, spirals, and animal forms. Sensing rhythm, flow, and intention, and imagination drifted across ceremonies observation, and patient shaping preserved in tactile detail for attentive observers centuries later. Moss pressed cool against fingertips, contrasting with warm stone, releasing earthy scent and gentle dampness, while reflection moved across past lives, careful shaping, and ceremonial presence, sensing that memory could reside silently in grooves, shadows, and the rhythm of human attention. Animals etched in stone seemed mid-motion, frozen yet alive, while fingers followed contours slowly, sensing deliberate rhythm, attention, and care as imagination wandered through ritual, observation, and cycles of life preserved in patient, tactile memory across centuries of quiet continuity. Water whispered over surfaces, brushing grooves with soft murmurs, while thought alternated between observation and reflection, noting arcs, spirals, and relief, sensing reverence, attentive shaping, and enduring presence pressed into stone, offering tactile dialogue between maker and present observer. Shadows deepened over boulder faces, revealing fine relief, contours, and subtle irregularities, while awareness shifted between tactile observation and reflective thought, recognizing enduring presence, patient intention, and quiet reverence embedded in grooves for patient hands and attentive minds across generations. Steps slowed along riverbanks, noticing worn carvings, mossy patches, and glimmering water, while thought lingered on careful shaping, subtle tactile memory, and quiet observation. Connecting centuries of human care, patience, and reverence preserved through deliberate motion in stone. A bison poised mid-stride held attention, legs extended, head lowered. Horns curved, suggesting life, motion, and ritual, while fingers lingered on edges, sensing deliberate shaping, attentive presence, and rhythm embedded in stone that preserved silent stories across centuries. Insects skimmed water surface, brushing sunlight with delicate wings, while focus returned to carvings, noting spirals, arcs, and faint relief, sensing continuity, reverence, and patient intention. Linking past and present through quiet tactile perception and gentle reflection of human presence. Grooves hinted at tools, motion, and careful shaping, subtle yet deliberate, while thought wandered across observation, ritual, and attentive cycles of care, fingers tracing each line, sensing dialogue, continuity, and enduring presence pressed into stone for quiet reflection. The scent of damp limestone, moss, and earth mingled with river air, filling awareness while thought lingered on minute details, the curve of a hoof, depth of relief, direction of spirals revealing careful attention, observation, and quiet memory preserved in tactile form. Fingers traced curves, spirals, and arcs, sensing rhythm, flow, and deliberate shaping, while imagination wandered through ceremonies, observation, and seasonal cycles. Linking centuries of careful attention and reflection, understanding that tactile memory carried quiet meaning beyond immediate perception. Sunlight shimmered across rippling pools and shallow water, reflecting patterns onto carved surfaces, while awareness alternated between tactile sensation, observation, and reflection, sensing patient presence, reverence, and continuity preserved through deliberate shaping across centuries. Hands followed grooves slowly, noting subtle depth, angle, and irregularity, sensing quiet rhythm, attentive presence, and enduring intention, while reflection encompassed past and present, linking maker, observer, and landscape through tactile perception and memory beyond words. Stepping back, sunlight revealed contours, arcs, and animal forms, and memory retained impressions of motion, abstraction, and deliberate shaping, carrying quiet reverence, patient observation, and enduring tactile memory preserved in stone across generations. The river flowed gently, stones glimmered with shifting sunlight, and air carried earthy scents, while awareness lingered on carved marks. Subtle human intention and quiet continuity, leaving impressions like soft echoes through time. Embedding observation and reverence in perception. A final glance lingered on spirals, animals, and faint handprints, noticing balance between abstraction, observation, and tactile memory, while thought rested in calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved along the bank, leaving stone memory preserved in mind. Sunlight shimmered on flowing water, gentle breeze brushing skin, and sensory impressions of touch. Sight and scent blended into lasting awareness, as thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and quiet memory preserved in stone. Water and patient shaping. Edges of carved boulders warmed under sunlight. Moss and lichen softened tactile contrast, and attention wandered between surface and relief, sensing the careful shaping of each groove and quiet presence preserved across centuries through touch, observation, and subtle memory. Small patterns suggested life, motion, and rhythm, fingers tracing each line slowly, sensing deliberate shaping and attentive care, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and quiet ceremonies embedded in stone, bridging generations through patient, tactile memory. Rippling water reflected arcs and spirals, shadows shifting across surfaces, while thought alternated between observing detail and reflecting on continuity. Presence and reverence, sensing patient attention and quiet endurance preserved in grooves pressed by hands long vanished. A carved handprint, faint but visible, invited reflection on care, presence, and deliberate intention embedded in stone. Imagining the person who left it and the thoughtful pause, patience, and attention that allowed memory to endure quietly over centuries. Sunlight glimmered on shallow pools, moss brushed against fingers, and attention returned to arcs, spirals, and reliefs, sensing rhythm, repetition, and subtle presence. While reflection wandered across cycles of life, observation, and ceremonial care quietly preserved in stone. Steps slowed along the bank, observing worn carvings, mossy patches, and flowing water, while thought lingered on careful shaping. Subtle, tactile memory and quiet observation, bridging centuries of human presence with calm, reverence, and contemplative understanding. Shadows stretched across boulders, revealing contours, relief, and irregularity, while awareness absorbed tactile, visual, and olfactory impressions, integrating river, stone, and light into reflection on enduring human intention and quiet dialogue between past and present. A final tracing of spirals, animals, and abstract lines left fingers lingering on grooves, sensing rhythm, care, and subtle intention, while memory settled into calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved slowly through riverbanks and carved stone. Sunlight shimmered on water, gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of touch, sight, and scent melded into lasting awareness. As thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and quiet memory preserved in stone, water, and patient shaping, morning light traced the curves of ancient carvings, illuminating spirals, human forms, and animals, while fingers lingered on grooves, sensing deliberate shaping, quiet attention, and reverence pressed into stone, quietly carrying stories older than any spoken memory. A soft wind stirred the moss and lichen, clinging to boulders, brushing against skin and carrying the faint scent of earth and water, while thought drifted across imagined ceremonies, observation, and patient shaping preserved within each line and relief. Shadows shifted gently over curved surfaces, revealing subtle depth, texture, and irregularity, while awareness alternated between tactile perception and reflective thought. Tracing motion, ritual, and human intention quietly embedded in stone for those willing to linger and observe. Small pools reflected sunlight onto grooves, highlighting spirals and animal forms, while fingertips traced contours slowly, sensing rhythm, patience, and attentive shaping, and imagination wandered through cycles of life, observation, and quiet care preserved in subtle, tactile memory. Moss felt cool against warm stone, releasing earthy fragrance and damp softness, while thought lingered on meticulous shaping, ceremonial attention, and quiet observation, understanding that memory, ritual, and presence could persist silently in grooves, shadows, and the rhythm of human touch. Animals carved mid-stride suggested motion, life, and ritual, while fingers followed each contour. Sensing deliberate rhythm and attentive care, and imagination drifted across ceremonial observation. Cycles of life and subtle shaping meant to endure in tactile memory across centuries. Water whispered over surfaces, brushing carvings with soft murmurs, while thought alternated between observing detail and quiet reflection, noting arcs, spirals, and relief, sensing reverence, patient attention, and continuity embedded in stone for careful observers long after their creation. Shadows deepened across boulders, revealing nuanced texture, relief, and subtle imperfections, while perception shifted between tactile observation and reflective thought, sensing enduring presence, attentive shaping, and ceremonial reverence embedded in grooves for observers patient enough to notice. Steps slowed along riverbanks, noticing carved boulders, mossy patches, and shimmering water, while thought lingered on careful shaping. Tactile memory and attentive observation, linking centuries of human presence, patient ritual, and quiet reverence preserved in stone through deliberate motion. A bison poised mid-stride captured attention, legs extended, head lowered. Horns curved, evoking life, motion, and ritual, while fingertips lingered on edges, sensing deliberate shaping, patient intention, and rhythm pressed into stone, preserving silent stories across generations. Insects skimmed water surface, brushing sunlight, while attention returned to spirals, arcs, and reliefs. Sensing subtle continuity, reverence, an attentive presence linking past and present through tactile perception, imagination, and quiet reflection of human engagement. Grooves suggested tools, motion, and deliberate shaping, subtle yet precise, while thought wandered across observation, ceremonial care, and attentive cycles of life, fingers tracing each line. Sensing dialogue, enduring presence, and quiet memory pressed into stone across centuries. The scent of damp limestone, moss, and soil mingled with river air, filling awareness while thought lingered on minute details, the curve of a hoof, spacing of spirals, angle of arcs revealing careful observation. Ceremonial attention and quiet memory preserved tactily. Fingers traced arcs, spirals, and animal forms, sensing rhythm, flow, and patient shaping, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and seasonal cycles, linking centuries of attentive presence. Understanding that tactile memory carried quiet meaning beyond immediate perception. Sunlight shimmered across rippling pools, reflecting patterns onto carved surfaces, while awareness alternated between tactile sensation, observation, and reflection, sensing enduring presence, patient shaping, and reverence quietly preserved through deliberate touch over centuries. Hands followed grooves slowly, noting subtle irregularities, depth, and angle, sensing rhythm, attentive care, and enduring intention, while thought encompassed past and present, linking maker, observer, and landscape through tactile perception and quiet memory beyond words. Stepping back, sunlight revealed contours, spirals, and animal forms, and memory retained impressions of motion, abstraction, and deliberate shaping, carrying quiet reverence, patient observation, and enduring tactile memory preserved across generations. The river flowed gently, stones glimmered in shifting sunlight, and air carried earthy scents, while awareness lingered on carved surfaces. Subtle human intention and quiet continuity, leaving impressions like soft echoes across centuries. Embedding observation and reverence in perception. A final glance lingered on spirals, animals, and faint handprints, noting balance between abstraction, observation, and tactile memory, while thought rested in calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved along banks, leaving stone memory preserved in mind. Sunlight shimmered on flowing water, gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of touch, sight, and scent blended into lasting awareness, as thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and quiet memory preserved in stone, water, and patient shaping. Edges of carved boulders warmed under sunlight, moss softened tactile contrast, and attention wandered between surface and relief, sensing careful shaping and quiet presence preserved across centuries through touch, observation, and patient memory. Small patterns suggested life, motion, and rhythm, fingers tracing each line slowly, sensing deliberate shaping and attentive observation, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and quiet ceremonies embedded in stone. Bridging generations through patient tactile memory. Rippling water reflected spirals and arcs, shadows shifting across carved surfaces, while thought alternated between observing detail and reflecting on continuity. Presence and reverence, sensing patient attention and quiet endurance preserved in grooves pressed centuries ago. A carved handprint, faint but visible, invited reflection on care, presence, and intention embedded in stone. Imagining the person who left it and the thoughtful pause, patience, and attention that allowed memory to endure silently over generations. Sunlight glimmered on shallow pools, moss brushed against fingers, and attention returned to arcs, spirals, and reliefs, sensing rhythm, repetition, and subtle presence. While reflection wandered across cycles of life, observation and ceremonial care quietly preserved in stone. Steps slowed along the bank, observing worn carvings, mossy patches, and flowing water, while thought lingered on patient shaping. Tactile memory and quiet observation, bridging centuries of human presence with calm reverence and contemplative understanding. Shadows stretched across boulders, revealing contours, relief, and irregularity, while awareness absorbed tactile, visual, and olfactory impressions, integrating river, stone, and light into reflection on enduring human intention and quiet dialogue between past and present. A final tracing of spirals, animals, and abstract lines left fingers lingering on grooves, sensing rhythm, care, and subtle intention. While memory settled into calm reflection, carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved slowly through riverbanks and carved stone. Sunlight shimmered on water. Gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of touch, sight, and scent melded into lasting awareness as thought lingered in rhythm of observation, reflection, and quiet memory preserved in stone, water, and patient shaping. Morning light warmed the carvings, revealing subtle reliefs, spirals, and figures, while fingers lingered on grooves, tracing deliberate motion and ceremonial shaping. Sensing quiet intention pressed into stone, enduring long after spoken memory had faded into distant echoes. Cool river air carried the scent of moss, damp earth, and sun-warmed stone, brushing against skin and clothes, while observation shifted between tactile perception, reflective thought, and quiet understanding. Absorbing centuries of care, attention, and reverence embedded in each groove and curve. Shadows stretched across boulders, revealing depth, texture, and irregularity, while focus wandered between etched shapes and abstract forms, noting the rhythm of deliberate motion and the patient shaping that allowed memory, presence, and ceremonial intent to persist silently across time. Small pools mirrored sunlight onto carved surfaces, amplifying subtle reliefs and contours, while hands brushed over animal forms and arcs. Sensing delicate motion, ceremonial observation, and patient attention captured in stone, carrying quiet stories across generations for those willing to linger. Moss felt cool under fingertips, releasing faint earthy fragrance while thought traced arcs, spirals, and figures, wandering through imagined ceremonies, cycles of life, and attentive shaping. Understanding how deliberate, careful presence could embed memory into the quiet permanence of stone. Water lapped gently along the riverbank, reflecting sunlight onto worn surfaces, while awareness shifted between observing texture and reflecting on intention, noting that rhythm, ceremonial care, and subtle shaping endured beyond fleeting human presence, preserving quiet memory for patient perception. Animals carved mid-motion drew attention, their limbs extended, heads inclined, and shapes frozen in deliberate stasis, while fingertips traced contours, sensing attentive hands, ceremonial observation, and rhythmic shaping pressed silently into stone, carrying stories of life, ritual, and enduring presence. Shadows deepened, highlighting irregularity, relief, and subtle curvature, while thought moved between tactile sensation and reflective contemplation, sensing patient shaping, quiet reverence, and enduring presence. As though every groove and curve carried the echo of attentive hands and long-forgotten ceremonies. Steps slowed along river stones, noting carved boulders, flowing water, and mossy patches, while observation lingered on deliberate arcs, spirals, and figurative shapes, sensing careful shaping, ceremonial awareness, and tactile memory bridging centuries. Quietly preserving continuity of attention and reverence. Sunlight shifted across carved faces, revealing depth and subtle irregularities, while hands lingered on each line, absorbing rhythm, motion, and deliberate shaping. Allowing imagination to drift through cycles of life, ceremonial presence, and patient observation preserved silently across generations. Fingers followed grooves and reliefs slowly, noting precise arcs, spirals, and animal forms. While thought wandered through quiet rituals, observation, and attentive shaping, sensing continuity, reverence, and careful memory pressed into stone for patient observers across time. Soft winds stirred moss and lichen, carrying earthy fragrance, while attention shifted between tactile perception, visual reflection, and contemplative thought. Noting subtle variations, depth, and irregularity, sensing ceremonial care and patient shaping as memory passed silently from maker to observer. Rippling water reflected sunlight onto worn carvings, highlighting grooves, arcs, and figures, while fingers traced each line, sensing deliberate shaping, ceremonial intention, and subtle rhythm pressed into stone, linking past and present through tactile, reflective memory. The scent of damp limestone and river air mingled with moss and soil, filling awareness while thought lingered on abstract spirals, animals frozen mid-motion, and arcs shaped with deliberate care, preserving quiet memory and ceremonial attention across centuries. Hands traced arcs, spirals, and figurative forms, noting subtle depth, variation, and curvature, while imagination wandered through rituals, observation, and careful shaping, understanding how presence, patience, and attentive care could endure silently, pressing memory into stone for quiet reflection. Sunlight shimmered across flowing water, shadows shifted across boulders, and awareness alternated between tactile perception, visual observation, and quiet reflection, sensing rhythm, deliberate shaping, ceremonial care, and patient presence preserved in grooves pressed centuries ago. Edges of carved stone warmed under sunlight, moss softened tactile contrast, and attention lingered on subtle arcs, spirals, and animal forms, sensing rhythm, deliberate shaping, and ceremonial awareness quietly preserved, bridging centuries and embedding memory in stone for patient observers. Patterns suggested life, motion, and attentive observation, fingers tracing contours slowly, sensing rhythm and deliberate shaping, while thought wandered through quiet ceremonies, cycles of life. An attentive presence preserved in stone as tactile memory across generations. Rippling water mirrored carved reliefs, shadows moved across surfaces, and thought shifted between detailed observation and quiet reflection, sensing ceremonial presence, patient shaping, and enduring memory captured in grooves pressed long before current perception reached them. A faint handprint appeared among carvings, inviting reflection on care, attention, and human presence embedded in stone, imagining the one who left it, the patient shaping, and the quiet intention that allowed memory to persist silently across centuries. Sunlight shimmered on shallow pools, moss brushed against fingers, and attention returned to arcs, spirals, and figurative shapes, sensing rhythm, repetition, and subtle ceremonial presence. While reflective thought wandered across cycles of life, observation, and quiet memory preserved in stone. Steps slowed along the riverbank, observing worn carvings, mossy patches, and flowing water, while awareness lingered on patient shaping, tactile memory, and ceremonial observation, linking centuries of human presence with quiet reverence and contemplative reflection. Shadows stretched across boulders, revealing depth, relief, and subtle curvature, while tactile, visual, and olfactory impressions merged, integrating river, stone, and light into reflection on enduring human intention and the dialogue between past and present. A final tracing of spirals, arcs, and animal forms left fingers lingering on grooves, sensing rhythm, care, and subtle intention, while memory settled in calm reflection. Carrying quiet reverence forward as figures moved slowly along riverbanks and carved stone. Sunlight shimmered across water, gentle breeze brushed skin, and sensory impressions of touch, sight, and scent melded into lasting awareness. As thought lingered in the rhythm of observation, reflection, and quiet memory preserved in stone, water, and patient shaping. Finally, stepping back, a deep calm settled over the carvings, the river, and the surrounding landscape. As sunlight, shadow, and moss intertwined with memory, observation, and tactile awareness, leaving silent stories preserved in stone to be quietly sensed, remembered, and honored.